Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. Joining me today is Dorian Gorski. He's been a regular on the show with the Main Image Monthlies, of course, and today we're going to record his in-depth, but we've had a pretty interesting conversation, this hot topic at the moment, and the speed of which AI is going. So we're going to cover this today because I think it'd be worthy of sharing, and then we'll do his in-depth next week. So Dorian, welcome to the show.
Hi, Danny. Thank you for having me. I'm quite excited for this conversation.
Yeah.
We didn't have a chance to dive really deeply into this, so looking forward.
Yeah. So where do you want to pick the thread up from? Because I think the best angle to start is the design angle, being a designer versus non-designer, and the beautiful option that everyone has access to AI and they can get an output to a level, right? Which is unprecedented. So give me your rundown of how you've seen things as an agency that's been running 10 years doing main images, etc.
I think AI and the whole LLM revolution really affected, and maybe affected is the bad word, but challenged the creative industry in a way.
Yeah.
The main thing that we see in terms of the latest updates and people sharing outputs is usually visual. So from the creative agency perspective, yes, it's been a revolution. I'm not gonna lie, I panicked at the beginning, where I saw the outputs and I was thinking, damn, I might be out of the job. But I think we've gone through so many revolutions in the history, so sometimes you just have to go back and look at a larger timeline, longer timeline, see that in fact we had plenty of those, from phone to computers to even Photoshop, right? When Photoshop first came out, designers started to panic because, those people that were drawing things by hand, they're like, okay, we're out of job.
Yeah.
So not really same as, laundry machine is not going to get rid of the need to clean your clothes. So you just have to find opportunities, and you have to obviously get to know the technology, and just ride the wave and see what it gets you. The worst thing you can do really is to ignore any type of, especially technology, advances in technology. And we've learned this from Blockbuster versus Netflix, where you kind of brush off and say, okay, that's not going to affect me, and then a couple of years later you're out of business. So I think from our perspective, we are embracing it, and we are embracing it fully.
Yeah. I mean, just to go on, you said about the evolution. Let's take, for instance, the music industry, right? Let's look at the cycles there. There is a point from about 88 onwards, 86, 88, but it really came to the fore in the UK with the rave scene in 88, is more and more people were making records in that way on computers. We were all using Atari ST. I started later than 88, but the first wave came through. But then musicians would say that's not real music and that you can't play. But electronic music wasn't about having chord progressions, etc. Right? And some of the biggest records, like dance music records, are one-note bass lines that very rarely go up and down in key. And there are other elements to what goes into a house record versus a musician, like a jazz musician. And the interesting thing for that is, if you think about audio and MIDI and being able to sequence inside of a computer, you had this group of people over here who are musicians would complain about this new music made in computers and it's not real music, right? And these people were going, fuck them, who cares? I'm not interested. If I want to make on the computer, you carry on doing your noodly jazz bars and stuff. However, and I see this because I witnessed this whole collapse with LimeWire. People that were making dance music were complaining about the internet, and then people getting their tracks for free and downloading because they're stealing their art. So one side you've got a musician saying that's not real music, that's not artistry. The people after the development of that 10, 12 years were complaining that their art is being stolen, their musicianship, their music's being stolen. So they complained about the internet. And now you got the next wave, the people that come through the internet and who embraced it and give away all their tracks as part of promotion, rather than trying to sell them vinyl and stuff. That wave of people are now complaining about people that are making tracks with AI because it's easy to do and it's not proper music. So as we go through the evolutions, do you see what I mean? You have to be and embrace each of these cycles, or you know, lo and behold, you'll be left behind.
I'm glad that you mentioned musicians. So I'm going to follow up with the question. Do you think we see the biggest pushback mostly from creative people, and it could be because we're just so proud of our skills and expertise, and I don't know, maybe this is something with human nature where we feel insecure and we're feeling like losing control? Because you've mentioned obviously AI now these days is affecting the creative industry massively, and the technology was, and you mentioned just music scene when the new tools were released. Is there something there?
Yeah, what it comes down to is the fact that we all live by our own perception, right? It doesn't mean what you see is exactly what everyone else sees, right? So you see your worldview through your lens, and your lens is developed by years on the planet, childhood, everything else that goes into it, right? There's a makeup there. Now, what happens there is innovation is taking the past and then turning it into the future. If we look at it as a broad stroke, 10,000 feet. So if you're a musician who's learned to play the piano very well, and you do things a certain way and you like certain things, when this noisy tin music comes along with bomb, 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 it's not music to you, right? But the people that making the bomb, 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 the tin music, are no different to the punks in the 70s, because that was a racket. They weren't proper musicians. They couldn't sing, but it was still music, right? And what does it come down to? It comes down to perception. Music and taste and beauty, there's a subjective element to it. So those generations that don't embrace, saying it's not like the old days, right, are going to get left behind. But in these cycles which have got faster, the forward generation is saying the same things as the musicians did in the late 80s. Do you understand? Because we've gone through that cycle, right? So let's look at the cycle. Yeah. Musicians making records on the computer, that's noise, not any good, right? And they're not artists, they're not musicians. 2001, LimeWire comes along. All the artists, dance music as well, who make bomb, bomb, bomb music in the musicians' eyes, and now saying, it's not fair, our art is being stolen, our musicianship is under attack. But you weren't a musician to the previous generation. Do you understand? And those people that were stealing off the LimeWire and stuff were the next wave of the industry that knew they could just put their tracks out, starting with MySpace all the way through various different MP3 aggregators now, because the whole distribution network has changed. And then that generation is now complaining about AI because it's not proper music. They're not musicians. They're not artists, because they're just using prompts to make the music, or whatever way that they're deciding to their application to making the track. And they say it's not fair because what I spend 2 weeks building, all the production and working out samples, drums, melodies and stuff like that, and then paying for the mix down the record, you can do the same with AI, but without that talent that they have, because it takes 7 to 10 years to learn to be an audio engineer of a half decent level to get a track mix down. So all what's happened is the previous generation has seen themselves in a new light. They are the artist, they are the musician, but the previous generation said they weren't. So the people that would say, well, fuck them, the musicians, 80s, then fuck them, LimeWire. And now the LimeWire crew that have developed is going, fuck AI, we're taking away our artistry. Do you understand? It's still creative. It's an output and people are enjoying it. It may be subjective, and that subjectivity reduces as the niche of that music grows and develops. So all
Yeah,
that's happening now is that, really, to me.
yeah. I have few musician friends, and I remember last month we were sitting down and chatting just about this. And I've asked them a question which I'll ask you. Okay, so we talking about from the perspective of the craft, the maker that's very protective of their craft. But let's put yourselves, you Danny, in the shoes now of the consumer. Let's say you open your Spotify account this morning, you go in for a run and you have the latest release album, it gives you a suggestion of the latest release, and you see something's popping, and you put it on your headphones, you run, and you're like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've heard since, I don't know, Beatles or something like, I don't know, or like UK Garage. And you're just completely pumped. And then you find out it was all AI created. How would you feel?
I think the consumer doesn't care because they're not, it's not, this is your craft, remember? This is your craft and the skill that you developed. The consumer feels the music and hears the music and it resonates with them. The only people that would complain about that, let's say that, like we call them train spotters. These are people that are dedicated musos, right? Used to buy all the album release singles, go to concerts and stuff like that. And they'll be, their thing is like, he's a music connoisseur. So that very small crowd will hate it, right? And they'll push back and they'll go, poor musicians, because they're purists. They're in the purist thing. But we're talking everyday consumer. If you think about music, it resonates. It's an energy, right? It's a sound. It's a frequency. It works in a key. Now, if you think what most of the time, but not all, music can make you happy, it could be sad, it could be memorable, right? It connects memories around it. And you know the feeling when you've heard a record and you love it and you put it on repeat all the time in your playlist. Yeah, we've all done it. So, but if you're the everyday consumer who uses music as a passing interest and enjoys it, they're not getting into the politics. It's the purists that complain, and the purists are the smaller group.
Yeah, and I think the other issue with that is, let's say you find out it's all generated by AI. I think it still doesn't affect artists in any way, because artistry is also around, it's about personal branding. We don't follow brands and actually artists just because we like their output. I mean, that's the main thing, but there's also the character. We want to go to the concert, we follow them on Instagram, we want to get to know them on the personal level. And I think when people are scared of AI outputs, they don't realize that, yes, we'll see a lot of it soon, and we see it more and more. And I think here I want to touch on something that we discussed just before hitting the record on this podcast, is leveling the playing field. Right. So let's say when we saw, I'm going to go back again in history, when we saw a lot of mass manufactured food, for example, McDonald's, food that comes in a powder. People are thinking, okay, I no longer need to eat. I can just, pour water into a cup and I have 5 2-minute noodles. But with that, I think we start to appreciate, real food more and more, especially these days when we see a lot of food being mass produced, it's being tainted with all sorts of chemicals. We start to appreciate the real thing even more. Organic food, which is actually the food that exists in nature, is something that you're going to pay more in your supermarket compared to something that isn't. And I think here it's, the leveling of the playing field is going to happen with the outputs that AI is creating. What do you think?
Yeah, but as I said to you before, it's the floor raises. Yeah, so it starts here. So can we go into that conversation? I'll give the analogy of what we discussed, and you said, "Oh, I didn't really think about it that way." you were telling me about, like, you know, the researcher roles were reduced because AI was a lot faster and you only needed one. And then I was
But
saying to you,
yeah,
go on, you tell
I'll
that
tell
story.
you
Sure.
exactly. I'll say that the main thing that I was concerned, and when you kind of shine some light, a couple of months ago, not a month ago, when I saw the latest OpenAI image generation release, I was blown away, like everyone else.
Yeah.
And the first thing that came to my mind is, wow, now everyone has access to it. And I was super excited for especially brand owners that didn't have the budget to work with agencies. You know, a lot of times people come to me like, we really want to work with you, but you just can't afford it. And, you know, I like everyone to have a chance at winning. We all do, if you're a nice person. But suddenly they do.
Yeah.
And that means that everyone in the world can create high quality content. And I was super pumped about this, but then a thought came into my mind. It's like, okay, if all the content is good in the world, where does it leave us? And here you had a really good answer.
Yeah. So my take on it, and I say this, we've got the workshop coming up, and it's especially around that for non-designers, and if you're working on the budget, because let's say you're doing it yourself or you're getting it off Fiverr, you're able to take up that next level. So if we say Fiverr from last year, 2 years ago, I'm not saying that the people on Fiverr that are using AI. So I need to separate that. So people would go onto Fiverr and places like that. And let's be honest, if you've got an eye for design, you would know that 99% of Fiverr, unless you find a unicorn pissing rainbows, it's garbage. I'm sorry to say it, but it's absolute garbage, because you're going to go up against commercial images. Now, for some people, it won't look garbage to them because they're brilliant at numbers, they're brilliant at PPC, but maybe design isn't their thing. Fair enough, because we can't be great at everything. So what you see is like, well, yeah, that looks good. Then we entered the fray. Let's say that you don't know how to use Photoshop, Illustrator, etc. You're not was drawing as a kid, even at a low level, right? If you and another person, it might look like a 6-year-old has done something in paint if you've got no design sensibilities or learnt the software. That's a fair thing to say. You do it 150, 200 times, you get better. Every time you do it, you get better, right? The more you do it, you get better.
Yeah.
So that isn't an attack or anything. The point I'm trying to get to is if you imagine the output on Fiverr and the output, the person who's not really a designer and everything, but they're doing it to cover the costs and stuff, has now, the floor is risen for all of the floors on that level. And what I mean by that, let's say, is that the everyday person can get an output superior to what they could do in Photoshop and design programs if they've got no design skills. So that person now gets something as an output. So let's hold that thought. So this is good because you're starting your business on your way up and you haven't got the money to spend for a third party, and you've now got a better chance because your images are that much better because the floor's risen up to the next step. But so be everyone else's. And I go back to the domain knowledge thing, let's say that like yourself, I'm not a designer, but you've got Alex, who works for me, he's got 30 years worth of design experience. What do you think his output looks like prompting versus mine? The nuances, right, of the designer is different. What output would it look like if you needed to knock up a legal contract in something like ChatGPT or whatever versus versus a lawyer that has the knowledge and uses ChatGPT just for speed to get the legalese? And there's a difference between those two, right? So whilst they're getting closer together, if you're like an exceptional designer or you're an exceptional engineer, you are going to go like that. So the floors come up from the bottom to there. So everyone's floor is risen. But then the people that are really good at it with the domain knowledge will probably 10x to a certain level. It will top out. are you still on course with me? You understand where I'm
Yeah.
going with this? Yeah. So what we've got is that we've got this output rise, and it's improved, and that's fantastic, and it's allowed people to do that. But then there's going to be a rise at the top. And now it's going to have to equalize somewhere in the middle. The gaps are getting closer, but then further away. So if you're a designer the biggest problem with a designer, right, is bottleneck. Why? Because design people can lose hours in the design. So if you're a designer and working for a brand, imagine how much more output that you can get. If you're an agency working for a brand like you, look at the output that you can get and the volume of that output, and then the value for money for that volume for the output, because you can do the creative stuff that you already know is that domain knowledge, which would take you 10x or whatever it is to do without it. Now you can produce that level of quality, if not higher, because you've got tools that enhance your knowledge in terms of, the tools are enhanced off the back of your domain knowledge to increase, to improve volume, right? And we said earlier on, fatigue, right? Everyone has decision fatigue. The average person wakes up in the morning, then first 5 hours, if they're a morning person, they're the key hours. That's where you do your deep work, your best work, and everything else. No different from sitting in a recording studio like I did for 20 plus years. No different for you to sitting there doing design work. Eventually, that fatigue kicks in because you've got to do the emails, that thing over there is laborious, and you come back and you get distracted. Now what happens if you've got everything running autonomously and running AI in the background? It frees up more time for the creative work. The creative work you do will give you more expansive because you now can prompt through the future. Therefore, chances are you can improve what you get and the volume and the speed of which you get. So it does start to equalize as it comes up.
Yeah. And I can tell you exactly from our perspective where it has the biggest impact. So 3 years ago, when first GPT-3 came out, I stopped working for 1 year. I wasn't doing any content for 1 year. I said, stop, like full on stop. I remember I was in Italy and I said, like, I need to stop and full on. So I spent the next 6 months researching the technology. I even signed up to a Python course and LLM course. I was like, I need to really understand this. Where is this going? And in terms of the output, I knew the output is going to get better. So back then, I had a team of 30-something people, and I had some very talented designers. So our output was insane. It was great. Yeah. Just, even better than the GPT these days, but it was missing something. So where I actually saw opportunity in LLMs was not the image generation. And that's where I'm trying to maybe, with my trainings and with everything that I'm speaking about, and I'll be speaking at Seller Session, is yes, it can create great images. But I know from certain that beautiful images, it doesn't mean that they'll connect. Yeah. So where I saw the biggest opportunity and where we see the biggest impact from LLMs is research. It's trying to get as much data and analyze it as quickly as possible and summarize it. We used to do a lot of stuff manually. I had a research team of 5-6 people going through every single review one by one and just picking up keywords, the sentiments manually. And I've seen thousands and thousands of listings, and I've seen listings with horrible images, really bad. But they had this piece of copy or something written, and it connected, and it hit the spot. So that's, for me, that's where these days I see the most opportunity. And combined with the images, it's a killer. But I think a lot of people forget that content and beautiful content is just one. It needs to connect. And how do we find that connection? By truly understanding who we're speaking to. And that's where we mostly now focus on, is on the research and ideation workflows.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But why can you do that now? It goes back to my point earlier. You just walked straight into my point, right? Think about it. You've cut down the research end and you're spending longer in ideation. Where else were you spending it before? In research, not the ideation. Yeah. The research is the laborious work looking for the gold, right? It can take hours, weeks, months, depends whatever it is that you're doing. If something can do it, I'll give you a perfect example of this. Next year, for the first time ever, I will be doing seller sessions whereby I get to choose whether to have sponsorship or not, because I've now got a new model which will allow me to sell the tickets without the tickets being subsidized by a sponsorship. That's why the tickets are so cheap, because you can't do what I do on a $499 max ticket. And if you put my events on in the US, that's a $2,000 event. That's the reality. But because of the nature of the way that things had gone, I got venues with double dipping with their hands in my pocket. And then you've always got, like, even like last year, I turned down 22 sponsorship deals were disguised as speaking gigs. And because I held the line, I could have took the money, put them on stage, but I'm not doing that at my events. It's not a pay for play. I even got now, I won't go into details, but Amazon, can we, what's going on? Can we help with any content at seller sessions? You know, we've got some initiatives, the UK branch. And I'm like, one, it's a no, you're not going on my stage. And two, what world do you live in if you think with what's going on with our community now, you know, have you on that stage?